Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity?
Oh, Jesus.
Spoilers. Welcome to the channel, I'm Hayes. I talk movies all day, sometimes I talk about games, so subscribe right now if you want to be entertained. And today, I want to talk about Far Cry 3, the 2012 first-person action open-world shooter from Ubisoft, and as the name just might suggest, it's the third game in the Far Cry series. So I played this game recently for the first time, 12 years after it was originally released, and I want to share some thoughts about my experience. But before I do that, allow me to go through my personal history with Far Cry. So I actually got the first Far Cry game on release day way back in 2004. I can't remember if I pre-ordered it or not, but I do remember looking on the game website. Yeah, Game. Remember them? Well, they're actually still around, but sadly not the juggernauts they used to be. Anyway, I was looking on the game website for future releases and Far Cry caught my eye. Never heard of it before, didn't know much about it. As far as I was aware at that point, there wasn't even any or not much hype around it either. But the cover art looks cool and it was a first-person shooter which I was a big fan of at the time, so I paid attention to its release. Months go by and when I finally get a hold of it, I had a damn good time. Far Cry was a great game in terms of its gameplay, shooter mechanics, especially the sniper rifle. I was taking out dudes from miles away. It had an open world feel to it, but it was a very linear game, so you never really got lost or sidetracked. The graphics were great. At the time, the story was interesting, and if memory serves, it was the first game I played where the last person you kill was really just a regular dude. No superpowers, no energy bar that takes up the whole screen, just a guy. I mean, he was a bad guy, but yeah. Just a guy. So yeah, I really liked Far Cry. So when I'm hearing that there's a Far Cry 2 coming and a Far Cry movie based on the first game set for release in 2008, I'm pretty excited. Too bad they both sucked though. Well, to be fair, no surprise the movie sucked. Movies based on video games back then mostly didn't have a good track record. Although, I do maintain that Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat are the greatest video game movie adaptations of all time, point blank period. But I digress. Anyway, I didn't enjoy the game either, and honestly, I'm not sure I remember why. I remember playing it, I remember feeling bored pretty early on, and I remember not liking the open worldness of it, even though I liked open world games. And maybe I'd have to try it again to see if my opinion has changed, but back then, I didn't like it. So I put it down and moved on. Far Cry 3 came out in 2012, but by then, Far Cry 2 left a sour taste, so I didn't bother. Although, I did end up getting a copy of Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon for free, which I really liked. The 80s futuristic retro vibe was definitely my cup of tea, even though I actually prefer coffee, but that's besides the point. But as much as I enjoyed Blood Dragon, it didn't make me want to play Far Cry 3, even after getting that for free too. In fact, I don't remember when or how, but I also got Far Cry 4 and Far Cry 5 for free as well. I don't know, I guess I get lucky sometimes. Now Far Cry 4 I ignored, but I did play Far Cry 5 quite a bit, although I never actually completed it. I think I got stuck somewhere and then put it down for a day, and then that day turned into at least 4 years ago. But now here comes 2021 with Far Cry 6, which became the first Far Cry game I actually paid for since 2008, only because I got a really good deal. I think I paid like £18 for it on Google Stadia. Yeah, Google Stadia. Remember them? Alright, bit of a side note, but it has to be said. And I respect the fact that I'm just an outsider looking in and there's gonna be lots of things that happen that I just don't know about, but from where I sit, it looked to me like Google mismanaged Stadia into its grave. And it's a shame because Stadia was actually a pretty good gaming platform. You know, come to think of it, when Stadia closed down, they gave everyone a refund. And because my Stadia account is linked to my Ubisoft account, I still have access to Far Cry 6. So technically, I didn't pay for that either. I guess I've done alright with Far Cry games, innit? Here's hoping I can get Far Cry 7 for free too. Anyway, I really liked Far Cry 6. I mean, it definitely felt like it dragged the story out a bit longer than it needed to, but overall it was a pretty solid game. And anytime Giancarlo Esposito is playing a bad guy, you already know it's gonna be epic. But even then, it didn't make me want to go back and try the old games. You see, what had happened was, lately I've been finding myself gravitating more towards older/cheaper games, and that's a lot to do with time time and money and patience, or more specifically, lack of, with various commitments, responsibilities, and just other things I like to be doing, it gets harder and harder to justify spending £50 or £60 or more on a game I'd barely have time for, and any time I do have, I won't be able to play it anyway because they released that broken mess I gotta wait another 6 months for them to fix. Whereas with some cheap ass old game, it doesn't matter if I don't get to play it much because it only cost me like £2 on a Steam sale anyway. Plus, older games tend to be shorter and, more importantly, they actually work. So it was suggested that I should play Far Cry 2 or Far Cry 3. Now, Far Cry 2, I had that on the PlayStation 3 and I've long since sold it. But Far Cry 3, I've had that game sitting in my Ubisoft Plus library collecting digital dust for years, so I thought, why not? So let's talk about Far Cry 3 and what it was like to play this 12-year-old game. So the first thing I want to talk about is the language options. Usually when playing a game, I select English and never really think much else of it. But it just so happens that this year I'm learning to speak French, so I decided to take the opportunity to switch things up a little bit. And I know games have had language options for a long time now, but even still, I think it's really cool that something that is intended as an accessibility feature can also be used to help people learn a new skill. Now, I did switch it back to English and played most of the game that way because I wanted to hear Malcolm Mando's performance as Vaas.
Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change.
Which was scarily awesome, by the way. But then I put the French back on because honestly, it just sounded better in my opinion. The protagonist, Jason Brody, sounds a lot less like some youngster from the suburbs. And yeah, I know that's exactly who Jason Brody is. But I've seen enough 90s high school and college sitcoms to believe that voice can be a badass taking down whole militia groups. Nah, that's the voice of someone who gets killed within the first 10 minutes of a low-budget teen slasher movie. Anyway, I was playing with a control pad and yes, I know keyboard and mouse is more accurate, but these times, man's all about the comfort in it. But still, I felt the controls were mostly pretty tight. Aiming never felt like a problem. If I missed, I knew it was because I missed. Walking, running, swimming, and using boats all felt pretty good as well. Where it lacked me though is with the driving and the gliding. And to be fair, gliding didn't come up so much, at least not for me. It's an open world game, so that might be different for others. But driving is often a necessity, especially in the beginning where you don't have as many fast travel points. The main issue I had with the driving is that the land vehicles often felt too loose where they'd just be sliding around everywhere, especially when you go off-road. And yeah, I get that it's set on a poor remote island where they don't always have paved roads, but if they have land vehicles, shouldn't they be built to drive on the type of land they have? And by the way, if you're thinking, well, just don't go off-road then, you would have to go off-road because there's no GPS on the minimap, just a general waypoint, so you're kinda having to guess your way to places, which means inevitably you would go off-road. Now, even though there's no GPS on the minimap, it wasn't necessarily difficult to find places, but you do often end up taking a wrong turn somewhere, sliding down a hill, getting stuck in a tree trunk, and then having to walk until you either find another vehicle or just get to where you're going. Either way, you get there. Now that said, it does seem like an odd choice to not have a GPS on the minimap. GTA 4 had that, and that was 4 years earlier in 2008. I suppose the idea is to encourage the player to explore more of the world, and to be fair, there is a lot to explore outside of the main missions. From animals to kill for crafting materials, plants to collect for medicines and near useless enhancements, outposts to liberate, bounties to hunt, there is a lot, but it never feels overwhelming. I'm typically not what you might call a completionist when it comes to games, but I do like when a game makes you feel like you could do it all if you wanted to. Most times I'm feeling like, ain't no way I'm even thinking about it. Now, I don't know if this is the first Ubisoft game to employ these mechanics, it probably wasn't, but a lot of these elements have pretty much become standard Ubisoft affair when it comes to their games, which is kinda cool, but it does also mean that some of the issues can carry across multiple Ubisoft games. Just like how Far Cry 6 felt like it dragged the story out longer than it needed to, same way Far Cry 3 did as well. And while we're talking about it, so did Assassin's Creed Origins. They're not bad games, they just need to go running more often and eat more vegetables. An example would be the whole thing with Buck. They could have just had a mission where you go looking for the knife. Instead, it got you running around on the orders of some jackass that you end up killing anyway. Most, if not all of that could have been cut out and it would be fine. Now, I definitely liked that you get to kill Buck because he was a prick, but I was hoping for it to be a choice. Back in 2012, games that give players important narrative choices did exist. In fact, Heavy Rain was only 2 years prior in 2010, so it's not an unreasonable hope to have for Far Cry 3. But alas, no such choice. You kill Buck and give the knife to Citra. So for me, it's like, if that's what you're gonna do anyway, then perhaps this game could have benefited from being more linear. That way, it could have been shortened down and the story and the action could have been more engaging. Now, speaking of action, there are definitely some really cool action sequences, like when you fight the demon mind monster after Citra drugs you. By the way, after you defeat the mind monster, you wake up with a titties out Citra bouncing on your cock, so that's right. Guess we really shouldn't have been surprised when those allegations came out. Anyway, there's some other cool bits as well, like when you're escaping enemies and you're having to shoot at the people chasing you while someone else drives. The moments like that were really intense. Now, of all the characters you meet, I thought Sam Becker was the most interesting. He's an American CIA agent posing undercover as a German working for Hoyt. He helps you go undercover and gets you to the poker table where Hoyt is to be killed. But Hoyt was already wise to it and stabbed Sam in the neck. Rest in peace, Sam. Let's talk a little bit about the ending. First of all, I like that it gives you a point of no return warning before you enter the final stages. It gives you a chance to do some side quests and level up before proceeding. Now, once you've done that and you get to the end, Citra gives you a choice between killing your friends so you can join the Rakyat, or save your friends and leave the island. Now, because the whole game is about trying to save your friends, that's what I chose. But when the credits finish, you stay on the island anyway and you can do any remaining side quests. Now, I did look up what happens if you choose join the Rakyat, and in that scenario, you kill your friends, Citra gets her tits out again and lets you rummage through her tropical island, she stabs you, and while you're dying, declares that your unborn child would become the new leader of the Rakyat. After the credits roll, you're back on the island and you can do any remaining side quests. So either way, you end up back where you're not supposed to be. The choice makes no real difference other than how many times Citra shows you her tits. And can't lie, it's a little disappointing. Probably would have been better if they just didn't give you a choice at all. But to wrap this up, I do think Far Cry 3 is still worth playing in 2024. It mostly holds up pretty well. I was playing on a Windows 11 PC and only had 3, maybe 4 crashes, but the autosave feature works pretty good, maybe even better than some newer games, so I never had to repeat a whole lot after the crashes. And although it makes what I believe to be a few odd choices, overall it was still an enjoyable experience. And I know this doesn't matter much, but it was also the first Far Cry game to feature the villain on the front cover, so for better or worse, it did kick off a trend. But that's what I think of Far Cry 3. What do you think of Far Cry 3? Let me know down below, and while you're there, be sure to like, subscribe, and drop a suggestion if you don't mind.